What's going on, Bigger Pockets? It's Matt Faircloth. So a lot of people want to form partnerships around real estate. Most people that I know that are involved in real estate are in some kind of a partnership. This is a tough business to run all by yourself. Even if you've got a mentor and a coach and a this and a that, maybe even a few employees, it's very rare to have someone who operates the entire company without giving some ownership or partnership away to someone else. Partnerships are an extremely common way to run real estate, and that's because people bring different skills to the table. Maybe you're really good at selling, maybe the other person's really good at analyzing. Maybe there's just different skills that you can bring to the table that you can form together to form a collective company, right? So it's a good thing, and if formed properly, partnerships can be extremely effective because you don't have your blinders on, right? Like this partner sees this, the other partner sees something else. And maybe their collective view is able to support each other, right? So there are a lot of good reasons partnerships are effective, and a lot of super successful business people I know have a really good partner that is their, that's their eyes and that helps them out, or that's involved in the business, or brings something else to the table. Okay, so let's talk about it. But the problem, so that's why partnerships are great. The problem is that a lot of partnerships get entered into, and I've had partnerships that fell apart that were not a good thing, and that ended up just being something that fell apart or just didn't work out or whatever. And the reason why they fell apart is because I didn't get very clear on the 5 things I'm going to go over with you today. So before you guys enter into a partnership, it's really important that you examine the fundamentals of the partnership, which we're going to talk about now. The 5 questions that you need to ask before you go and form a partnership with somebody else. Because I know a lot of people that they'll go to one real estate club meeting, they'll meet somebody and say, oh my goodness, we should partner up. Like they'll meet them, go for 1 cup of coffee and say, okay, great, let's form a partnership and get into business together. What do you think? And that's kind of like, getting married after the first date. You don't want to do that. And that's because there's a lot to get to know about that partner before you go and hop in, okay? The biggest thing that you need to ask a partner, and I mean, believe it or not, my wife and I are kind of nerds about goals and stuff like that. So my wife and I started talking about this kind of thing while we were dating, before we even got married. So I recommend, if you're thinking of marrying someone, then you should ask these kinds of questions, right? What are your goals? Where do you want to be in 5 years? Because here's the reason, and this doesn't just work for a spouse, so I think you probably should get clear on this kind of stuff, is if you're partnering with someone, partnerships are typically not in and out partnerships that are over within a month or two, within even a year or two. Most partnerships that I've seen last around 5 years. Because it takes about that long to build something, have it be successful, and then complete it. Now, if you're partnering with somebody on just a fix and flip, or just a wholesale deal, that's like a quickie partnership, in and out. Now you could probably muddle your way through that, but if you're doing a long partnership with somebody, like buying rentals or building a business that's sustainable, then you need to get clear, because this can be a 5 or 10 year arrangement. So what are their 5-year goals? And if they tell you, glad you asked, Matt, I want to move to Puerto Rico, or I want to move to Cancun in the next 2 years. And you're like, well, geez, I don't want to move to Cancun too. And I think this business we're looking to build might take 5 years to build before my partner here goes and leaves the country. That might be a showstopper for you. So you want to make sure that there's an alignment on the goals that you have and that your partner has. So it should be something like, well, okay, in 5 years, I want to be operating our company, ABC LLC, that we're going to form. I want to be operating this full time. I want to be making X in revenue. I want to sell it for X amount of dollars in 5 years. Great, that's what I want to do too. You make sure that you're aligned on your goals. There are so many partnerships that I've seen that didn't examine this, and what happens is that your life goals continue, right? You still want to move to Cancun in 2 years or whatever it is. You still want that, and this even transitions into a marriage where when one spouse is like, well, I want to have kids. I don't, or I want to have kids in 2 years, I don't ever want to have kids, or I want to quit my job, or I want to move to Topeka, Kansas, whatever it is. You need to get clear on and get alignment on what you want life to look like. And really what happens is when you discuss these things, they get put on the table, and then a lot of times alignment can be negotiated. Well, maybe you don't move to Cancun for the first until 5 years or until 10 years. Maybe you can push that back in exchange for the success of this business. And we can both agree on that, maybe write it down, then that's something that we can agree upon. But if you guys get on the same page with your 5-year goals, That is the first fundamental thing. If you don't do that, my prediction is the business will fall apart because these other goals are going to show up, and they will eventually, if you can push them back in the background for a little while, they eventually will stay there and work their way up, and they will continue to scream at that person and say, wait, I don't want to be in this business anymore. I've always wanted to move to Cancun. I'm out of here. I'm going to walk away from this business and move to Cancun, right? So make sure that you're on the same page on the goals, right? Number two. Okay, number two is you got to get clear. A lot of times people enter partnerships because, like I said, this person's really good at selling, this person's good at analysis. Well, that transitions into, and there are personality assessments you can use. Myers-Briggs, DISC, Colby. There are a bunch of them out there. Use something like that to determine what you and each of the other partners are great at. Okay, Sally, you're great at selling. It looks like your Colby score says that you're a really good implementer, or you're a really good quick start. And Steve, you're a really good executioner, or you're really good other stuff, whatever. So it looks like the roles of the company should look like this. Okay, so get clear on who's going to do what. I've had a partnership in the past that was not clear who was going to do what, and we ended up stepping on each other's toes and overlapping. And a more crucial issue came up was that there was a role that we needed that we didn't have in the company because we didn't really assess what I was great at, what they were great at, and what we were also, to really look ourselves in the mirror, not great at, right? And what it turns out was we were both not great at the same thing, and that thing is what we needed somebody to step in as a third party to be in our team. And if you don't have that, you'll have a gap on your leadership team, and you want to discover that through a roles analysis, okay? Through who is doing what, right? And that transitions, now that's a skills analysis, okay? Who's doing what here, right? Now the next thing you need to consider on roles, right, is time. Now, you can have partnerships with people that have a full-time job. That's okay, because guess what? They don't have to go to bed right when they get off of work. There's another 8 hours typically of time that they can put towards something else. Now, they might have a family, they might have other stuff, they might want to go do CrossFit for 2 hours every night. Whatever it is, you got to make sure that there is enough time from you and your partner for the success of the business to get to the goals, okay? If you're partnering with someone who has an 80-hour-week obligation in their job, and the role that they're going to take on in their company you believe is going to require 20 to 30 hours, you have a problem, right? They just don't have time, and you need to address that before you get into the partnership. So who's going to do what? And with what resources of time are we both going to do this? These are difficult conversations, but they need to get discussed because I'll just set that right there. There are difficult conversations that need to get discussed because if they don't get discussed, these difficult conversations are going to become super difficult problems that might be insurmountable in the structure of your company. And believe me, you want to discuss this, have the difficult conversation now versus once you sign the operating agreement and then you've got a partner and you have to have the difficult conversation later. It's more important to have it now. So skills that each person brings to the table that you can address through a personality assessment, and the time that each of you guys are going to bring to the table to implement the business plan, right? Number 3, compensation. Let's just call that money because there's another money conversation we got to talk about here, right? Money, I'll put the dollar sign, okay? Dollars, dollars, dollars. So that can tend to structure for a partnership that's really going to translate to % ownership. Now, you might have, if you have a company that has some cash flow already, that already has some resources coming in, then maybe you can start talking about a salary for the owners and say, okay, you're going to make X amount of dollars a year for your roles. You're going to make X amount of dollars a year, and on top of that salary, you're also going to get X amount of ownership of the company, equity splits. Typically for new companies, there's no cash flow, right? You're building it. And so it's really a conversation of how much ownership are you going to get? 50-50 split, 20-30 split, 20-30, 50, whatever it is. Typically, when people are looking to structure a partnership, this is the first conversation they want to have. But this really should be number 5, because this is the last conversation you should have above all the other fundamentals of structuring a partnership. The money should just be a result of all the other efforts and everything else. And people want to immediately start talking about, well, what split, what percentage of ownership are you going to give me and how much compensation? It's okay to have that conversation. It's important to have that conversation so expectations are met. But how much money and percentage of the company Each person's going to get, doesn't have to be the first conversation, it should be in there, and of course this is going to get defined in the partnership, in the operating agreement of the company, but it shouldn't be the first thing, but people tend to make it that way. Now, on top of money, this is another difficult conversation. Let's go here. Let's say you're partnering with someone and you find out once the partnership's already been filed that their home is in foreclosure and they're in bankruptcy. Okay? That sucks. Sorry to hear that. You know, I'm sorry to hear that for both of you. Sorry to hear that for them, because that really stinks for them. But for you as their business partner, that stinks for you now, right? Because they are going to need money to inject into their personal life to make those things happen. But that business that you own with them is also now their asset. And so if they're in the middle of a lawsuit, if they're in the middle of different obligations that could attach to their personal assets, those things could find their way over to assets that you own with them. Right? You kind of are hitching yourself to their wagon. Don't forget that. When you partner with someone, you are getting into bed. You're hitching yourself to them, right? This can tend to come up in the marriage conversation as well when you marry somebody is, well, what are your debts? What are your financial obligations? And so is their financial house, I'll draw a little picture of money and a house, okay? You need to know what their financial house looks like personally. Maybe ask them for a personal financial statement and make sure it's legit. Make sure it's, you want to vet them a little bit. If you want to be really, really hardcore, run their credit score. See if they've got bankruptcies and a bunch of debt on them and stuff like that. If they're not willing to be real with you and disclose those kind of things, then you don't want to part that person as a partner because they're not willing to get real and put it on the table. And I cannot stress enough, if they have financial issues in their personal life, then it's going to find its way into your business either through tracking, through bankruptcies or whatever, its way into your company, or just simply the way that they run their personal financial house is the way that they're going to run their business financial house with you, okay? So make sure you know what their personal financial house is. Number 4. Okay, we are moving. A lot of people get into partnerships and you realize these things are going to take forever. They're not. Unfortunately, everything has a beginning, middle, and an end. Everything that starts should have an exit at some point. So too often in partnerships, the exit is not discussed because it's like, no, we're going to ride off into the sunset and we're going to hand this business down to our grandchildren. Likely not. That's likely not what's going to happen, and that's okay. But likely this business will have a beginning, middle, and an end. And as I said before, it'll likely be in the neighborhood of 5 years. Right? 5 to 10 years is the typical life cycle of most companies if they don't fold up earlier than that. So you want to talk about and document what the exit plan is. Is there a buyout? Like what if Steve wants to stay in the company but Sally wants to get out? Can Steve buy Sally out? And if so, for how much? Is there unwinding clauses? Is there sale clauses? Whatever it is, simply talk about the exit for the company, and this is how we're going to wind things up. And make sure, of course, I keep referring back to this, but make sure that is in the operating agreement of the company. Make sure it's documented legally on how the company gets exited from. Too many people get into these businesses thinking about the beginning, and you don't think about the middle or the end. And you need to think about all 3 of those things, the beginning, the middle, and the end for a company when you're starting them. Okay? Now, numero 5. Okay? What ifs. Okay? Now, these are just if this, then that kind of things. You got to talk about, well, I'll give you what if. Let's say you enter a 50-50 partnership with somebody. Me and Steve decide to do a 50-50 partnership. Well, what if me and Steve have a dispute we can't settle? What do we do? What if I want to go left and Steve wants to go right? What if Steve passes away? God forbid, right? Unfortunately, nobody gets out of this thing alive, so it will happen eventually. So what if a lot of stuff, right? I don't know. Right? So just ask the what ifs, right? And there's no one what if that I got. I rattled off a few of them, but you should just really kind of live in the question for a little bit there and ask a lot of questions around what if this, what if that, what if this, what if that, and then address those questions as well, yeah, you know what, you're right. If you were to pass away, then this business would go to your wife. Or maybe you don't want that. If you were to pass away, I would get the first rights to buy it out and give your wife a check. Okay, that's a good option, right? Discuss it. Put it in the operating agreement, because too often these things don't get discussed and these what if things happen, because life, as they say, is what happens while you're making other plans. Sometimes life goes not the way you thought it was going to go, and things show up, and if you have carve-outs and addressments for the what-ifs, then you'll be able to handle those curveballs when they show up. And they do. Unfortunately, that's how life is, right? Let's put down the what-ifs. Okay. Now, here it is in review. 5-year goals. Make sure you all know where you want to go. on the same page and make sure that where you want to go is where they want to go, because you're about to partner with someone and you're about to go some great places, unless you don't want to go where the other person wants to go. Examine the roles. What skills do they bring to the table, and make sure they've got the time to implement the roles that you're going to give them and that they're going to take on, and make sure you've got the time. I didn't say that. Make sure you've got the time to implement the role that you're taking on in the company as well. Money. What percentage each person gets, and can make sure their financial house is in order. How we're unwinding this thing, what the exit strategy looks like, and the what ifs. This is just a big list of questions that you both need to come out. That are just what if this, what if that, what if this, that you need to discuss. Now, there's probably more here. I'd love to hear from some folks that have started business partnerships. Maybe some folks that have started business partnerships as I have that didn't work out because you didn't address one of these things. Maybe you've got some business partnerships that are super successful and there's a 6th or a 7th question that people should ask before they get in. Whatever it is, leave it in the comment box because I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for watching, guys. Have a great, profitable week.